Hello, everyone. So this is another episode of the Network Our podcast. I am your coach, Molly Kreese, and today I am here with Kristi Mitchell, and we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic. I'm going to be taking notes. I hope when you're listening that you will be taking notes because it's definitely a noteworthy topic. We will be talking about email marketing and social media tips. And so I am here with the marketing and data extraordinaire, Miss Kristi Mitchell, and I am going to let her introduce herself and tell her a little bit more about her and what she does. Go ahead, Kristi.
Sure. Thank you so much, Molly. I appreciate the intro and thank you for having me. So, I'm a marketing strategist and I really love helping small business owners and solopreneurs save time and energy by working smarter and not harder on their digital marketing, which can include everything from, social media, email, like we're talking today, also blogs, websites, all that good stuff. So I help my clients achieve positive, lasting success in their business by streamlining their efforts and creating a strategy to really give them direction and focus, because a lot of times people are missing that when it comes to their marketing efforts. And rather than doing the work for them, I act as a guide. So I provide strategic recommendations and accountability along the way, helping alongside them as they do the work. So that is a little bit about me.
Yes, great. I'm telling you guys, I need this. So my pen is in my hand and I'm going to be definitely taking some notes. So, Kristi, the first question I have for you is, what is email marketing? For those of us that don't know out there, and believe it or not, some of us don't, tell us
Yeah.
what is email marketing?
Yeah. So email marketing, I like to always, when I'm working with people or doing, free consultations, I like to really get to the root of like what they're trying to accomplish and think of it in terms of the marketing funnel or the marketing journey, however you want to think about it. So email marketing is a tactic that's really in the middle of the funnel. So it's not helping people find out about you because they already know about you, right? If you have their email address and they're on your list, they already know about you. So you're not attracting new people necessarily. But what you're doing is you're staying in front of those people who already know about you so that when the time is right, when they have a need, when they hear of someone who has a need for your services, you're top of mind and they think, oh, yeah, I should refer someone to Molly. Email marketing is a great way to showcase your thought leadership to really provide value to your audience by providing them with relevant, helpful content that helps to solve problems that they have. So I always encourage people to think in terms of problems that the target audience has and how can I create a piece of content that helps solve that problem and not really focus on myself and what I offer and my services and why I'm so great. Taking that approach where you're putting yourself in your audience's shoes and just looking for a way to solve a problem for them, I think provides a lot of value. And that's what's going to get people coming back to you and wanting to tune into your emails, however often you're sending them.
Yeah, so that can definitely be a difficult thing to do. So how do you do that? How do you develop a plan or a strategy to figure out your target audience, what you want to say, all of that stuff? Because I
Yeah.
imagine you have to plan it out before you actually go and start doing an email.
You do. So it really depends on what stage you're in. Some people, so if you don't have an email list at all, first thing you need to do is start building an email list. And the way you do that is by offering content. We call it gated content. So meaning like I'm going to write a white paper, an ebook, or have some sort of downloadable resource for somebody. And in order to receive it, they need to give me their email address. So that's like first and foremost. They're referred to as lead magnets a lot lately. So a way to collect email addresses so that people are saying, yes, I want this piece of content. And by signing up, I know I'm going to receive your emails going forward. So if you don't have an email list yet, that's the first place to start. A lot of people don't realize how many people they may already have that could be put into an email list. If they've been in business for a while and they just haven't been doing a great job of keeping track of contacts, names and email addresses, it might be something where you can do an export from, your email or whatever system you're using to get a list of people and start with that. So first things first, you need an email list before you can really start emailing people. Now, a lot of times people think like, well, I only have like 50 to 100 people. Like that doesn't seem like enough. Whatever you have is fine as a starting place. If you feel like you have enough people to make it worth your while to put the time and effort into creating emails, then I say go for it, because a highly engaged smaller audience is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than a list of thousands of people who barely know you and aren't going to be opening your emails. So the list is first. And then really think about what's realistic for you as far as how often can you be putting out an email. I usually tell people, if you haven't been doing it or you've been struggling with doing it, start with once a month. You want to pick a target that's realistic for you. And once a month is a great way to do, a monthly newsletter, something where, maybe you're including some of your blog posts that you've written recently. Maybe you're including links to podcasts you've been interviewed on recently. You can include articles that you're, curating from very reputable sources, like industry news related things. It doesn't have to be all content that you're creating. The email you're creating itself, but you can pull in other pieces of content so you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, I need to write like 5 separate pieces to be able to send out this monthly newsletter. So I think the list is first, setting what your cadence is going to be is second, and then thinking about really what you want to provide to your audience. Again, it should be mainly focused on resources and helpful topics to them, with maybe like a little bit of a sell at the bottom or somewhere weaved in there for, an offering that you have. Maybe you're running a workshop coming up, or you are, speaking at an event and you want to let people know about that. Or you just launched a new offering. Whatever it is, you can include that in your email, but do it in a more subtle way rather than making that the main focus of your message. And maybe too, if you're sending monthly newsletter emails, maybe you could also throw in a once a month, like, okay, I'm going to feature one of my offerings, right? So your newsletter is really that piece that's providing all the value, giving people helpful resource tips, tricks, all that good stuff. And then 2 weeks later, you're going to be sending a message about this new offering that you're launching. People are going to be more likely to tune into that sales message when you've provided the other really good stuff first. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, those are some really great tips. I know from what you said, I was one of those people who used to say, how am I going to create an email? I don't even have enough people to make an email list or whatever. But I've learned that it doesn't matter. You get it started, and as you go along, you build that list. And so these are great tips for planning out and how to build that email. And I was going to ask about the time frame, you not having enough time, because if you're a solopreneur, you don't have enough time to do all of these things on the back end. And so you answered the question even before I asked about doing it once a month or whatever. But I wanted to ask as well, is there something, how should I optimize my email campaign?
Yeah, so I love digging into data. So when I work with clients and they're already doing emails, I really like to look at the data. So I like to see, looking at the open rates is a great indicator of your, the health of your list, right? Are people opening your emails? So depending on the industry and the type of business you have, a good open rate can vary a little bit. I usually tell people 20 to 25%. It's kind of like benchmark. You want to have at least that. If you are really specific about your email list and you're only putting people in there that are highly engaged with you already, you could see even higher open rates, 30, 40, maybe even 50%. It just depends on kind of that, relationship that you have with those people on your list. So open rate is a great indicator, and also click-through rate. So open rate is basically telling you how well your email is doing from the standpoint of people seeing your name and wanting to open it, and your subject line. So if your subject line isn't great or enticing to people, then that could impact your open rate. So I always like to remind people, like, an open rate is really an indicator of, how good your subject line is. A click-through rate is how good is the content within that email. So click-through rates can vary. I usually say, if people are just starting out, 2 to 3% is a good click-through rate. Anywhere 5 and up is a really great click-through rate. Again, some of those things depend on the industry and the space that you're in, which you can also just go to Google and type in like email metric benchmarks for XYZ industry, and you'll get a whole bunch of, some of those big publications like bless you. Like Hootsuite and Sprout Social and all of those big name platforms put out a lot of this stuff on a yearly basis. So that's a place to go. But click-through rate is really important because you not only want people to open your email, you want them to take a next step.
Yeah.
And being very clear about what that next step is super important, because if I open an email and it's just like talking about this blog and the speaking engagement, like it's giving me all this information, but there's no clear, like, click this button to read the full blog post, or, download your free guide, whatever that call to action is going to be, you want to make sure it's clear, because you want people to take another step. You don't just want them looking at the email. That's great. But what is that next step they're going to take? Is it going to your website? Is it emailing you back? Is it booking a time to meet with you? It could be a variety of things, but I always like to remind people, be very clear about the call to action. So the click-through rate tells you how good your call to action is, because people are clicking on it. And then I also really like to work with clients to help them look for trends as far as day of the week and time of day that might be the best time to reach your audience. Again, this is something you can go out and do a Google search to try and find some ideas. If you're like, well, I think my audience is more likely to open on the weekend during the weekday, like, you can go out and do some quick searches, again, based on industry, and get some ideas as a starting point. And I always say, try it, see what happens. If you didn't get as good of results as you thought you would, well, try a different day or a different time. Another trick I like to also tell people is some email platforms make this really easy and some don't. But a lot of times they have a feature, like I know Constant Contact does, because I worked with a client on that. You can resend to non-openers. So as you're scheduling your email to go out, there's like a box you can check that says resend this email in 3, 4, 5, however many days with this new subject line. So that's a cool way to like really extend the life of the content, right? Like you put all this effort into creating this newsletter or whatever the email is. So if you can easily resend to non-openers, that's a great way to try and get more people to see your message again and get them to open it and engage with it.
Yeah. You mentioned Constant Contact. What are some of the best email marketing platforms that you would recommend?
There's so many. Constant Contact has some nice features. There's some stuff I don't love about it. MailChimp is pretty good. A lot of people work with MailChimp, although they've been kind of a controversial company lately due to some like internal stuff happening in like the sexual harassment area. So I know some people are actually moving away from it because they're like, I don't want to spend my money with a company. Do your research. I always tell people, do your research, find a tool that works for you. But a lot of people use MailChimp. I personally actually just started using Squarespace because that's where my website is. So if you have a Squarespace website, it might be a good tool for you to look into. It's pretty easy to use, offers a lot of basic functionality. If you don't have a Squarespace website, then it makes no sense. And also I work a lot in HubSpot. So that's one of my specialty areas. So I work with some clients who are on HubSpot, and that's like an all-inclusive software platform. So if you're literally just looking for email, it's going to be like way too much utility for you. I'm trying to think of some others. Those are the main ones that come to mind right now.
Yeah. I've used Campaign Monitor before, I think it's called.
Okay. I've also heard recently someone was telling me about Flowdesk. That's another one. I have not personally used it, but
okay. Yeah, these are some great. I know of Mailchimp and Constant Contact. Yeah, so those are some. Didn't hear about the issue though, but I will have to definitely research that. So I feel like you answered this question already. How do you know if your email campaign is successful with the click rate and the click through and stuff like that? If you know how to look for that, then you know people are opening your email, people are reading your email, so you know it's successful. Why is personalization in an email so important? And I know people struggle with this. I myself have struggled with it because you're like, what am I going to put in there? What I'm putting in, is it going to even attract attention? Is it going to be good enough? All of that. So, why is that so important?
Yeah, personalization can help when you use it. And for people who don't know, it's like merging things into a mass email that help make it appeal to the person, right? So you can merge in a first name. Um, and most platforms make that really easy to do. But also, you want to make sure. I was just working with someone yesterday and she realized a bunch of her contacts, she only has email addresses. She doesn't have their
The
names
name.
captured. So I would say stay away from personalization unless you know your data is good and clean, because otherwise it can kind of like muck it up and make it not look as nice. But a lot of times people will merge like first name into a subject line. That can help people. It might, grab, if you think about it and you have like a bunch of emails in your inbox and you see, oh, my first name is right there. Sometimes people see right through it if they're used to it, but sometimes it makes people more likely to open it. Like, oh, my name's in there. My attention's drawn to that email, so I'm going to open it. And then you can merge it into the body of the email as well. I've seen a lot more, and I feel like this is probably more relevant to the medium to larger size companies who have a lot of data. You can get really specific about personalization, right? So you can merge company names, you can segment your contacts based on like what stage of the sales cycle they're in. If you're capturing data, there's a way to segment and personalize based on it. So it really just depends, I think, on the business and what data you're already capturing, what ability you're going to have to personalize and segment your content depending on all of those variables, the information that you have.
And the platform you do would have a function that would do this for you. You will not have to put in the name manually in every email.
Correct. Yep. So most platforms make it really easy. I'm trying to think of the terms that some of the different platforms use, like personalization token, and then it will like let you pick based on the data that you have captured on the back end, like what field you want to merge into. So when you're sending your email out to your list of, let's just say 200 people, it's going to merge their first name into that, like, hi, Molly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just it helps. I think now at this point, everybody's so used to being marketed to by email. We all know it's not actually an email written specifically to me, but it's still nice to see your name there. It shows that people are taking the time to, try and
Yeah,
tailor that message
yeah.
and make it feel a little more warm and fuzzy.
I have definitely got caught a lot of times opening personalized emails because, like you said, as soon as I see my name, and I'm like, who is this person? Do I know this person from somewhere? And then when you open it and start reading it, you realize it's just a email marketing tactic. But it is so cleverly done. And I've read emails where you open it and then the email doesn't go into what it's talking about right away. They start with a story before they get to that point. And I feel those are so tactful because they get me to read them. So that is definitely something that is seems to be working because I'm reading it. So
Right, right.
so definitely I would definitely think about that.
One other thing I want to mention too, sorry,
Hmm.
I just because I'm thinking of it and it hasn't come up yet, is when you're building your email address, we talked a little bit about the importance of the subject line and getting people to open. But I also really tell people that I'm pretty sure all the email platforms I've worked on so far have this field, but there's a field for preview text. And so when the email shows up in somebody's inbox, you see the subject line, obviously, and then you see preview text, and how much you can see depends on the platform that you use for your email that you're reading it on. But I always tell people, don't forget to include preview text, because that is another opportunity to try and entice people into opening the email. So don't overlook that. It's really important to make sure you take the time to create an enticing subject line and preview text that's gonna catch someone's attention.
Yeah, another thing I want you to talk about too, because I think that is so important, is that when you create the email, and I think the platforms automatically have it, but I remember one time I was doing it, and it did, after I sent it, I didn't really remember to check, and it did not come out right. It came out different if you pull it up on a laptop versus if you pull it up on your phone. And I think a lot of people, when they get these things, because the phone is so handy and it's the first thing in your hand, that's where they're going to read the email. So talk about how important it is for formatting and all that stuff to make sure that it's readable on the phone.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I always forget to talk about that, and it's so important. So, most email platforms will allow you to send a test email. So, definitely send a test, especially if you're like embedding images and buttons and all this stuff. Like, you want to send a test and make sure that it's like looking good when you get it. Usually, you can, so that would be a great time to test it yourself, right? Like, I'm going to look at it on my desktop, and then I'm going to pull up my phone and I'm going to look at that test email and see how it looks. Some platforms also allow you to preview it right in the platform itself without sending the test email. So that's a great way too. I would still recommend both, because I don't know. I like to see it for myself. I don't necessarily trust the preview. But that is really important. And also, a lot of platforms will tell you after you send your email, when we were talking about, all the data that you want to be looking at, some email platforms will tell you the percentage of people who are opening on desktop versus mobile.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's a cool thing to pay attention to too, because if you realize, okay, the majority of people are opening this on their phones, and I'm using these huge images, or the mobile version doesn't look as great. If you know that the majority of your people are opening on mobile, design for mobile on your next email. Like, make sure that it's conducive to someone viewing it on a small screen. So that's another really great point.
Definitely, definitely. How to be, what's my next question I want to ask here? I feel like you answered this already. What is the best way to segment and target customers? Um, would you recommend a different platform based on the kind of business you have? Because if you're doing email marketing and say, let's for instance, you're in the finance space, or say, for instance, you're in the coaching space, is there a different platform you would recommend, or you just pick the best platform that's going to target your audience more effectively?
Yeah, I think it depends. I always try and advise people based on what other systems they're already using.
Hmm.
So I think that there's a lot with, like, so the example I gave, like, I'm using Squarespace emails because that's where my website is. I'm using Squarespace for my website anyway, right? So like that makes sense for me. I did consider using HubSpot emails, but the features, I wanted some automation. And in order to get the automation, I would have had to pay for like a higher level package, and like the cost just didn't make sense. So I think there's no easy answer, unfortunately. And I think that people can get really stressed out because there are so many tools out there to
Hmm.
choose from. It's not easy to say, like, okay, if you're a coach, you should use this. And if you're this, you should use that. Like, it really depends on what other systems you're already using for your business. One reason I like HubSpot for some clients is because if you need a CRM and you want a place to manage, scheduling out your social media posts, and you have to be sending emails, and all of these things, like, it makes sense to use one platform where you can have it all together. I'm all about like simplifying and streamlining wherever you can. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a straightforward answer, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So you're doing all these work to come up with title and to send out emails and all of that stuff. is what about monetization? Can you monetize your email campaign?
That's a good question. I think that the value of email campaigns comes in, like I said, if you're doing a good job of creating and sending out helpful, relevant content that your audience is like, wow, this is so helpful. Like, I'm definitely going to pay attention to these emails from Molly. Then when you go to send out that sales message about this new program you're offering, this new group coaching, this new, paid downloadable, like whatever it is, wherever that monetization piece comes in, I think that's the role that email marketing plays, is like, it's a great way to get your message in front of your audience. But I just think, again, I know I keep saying it. I just think it's so important to provide value and not just be sending out. I worked with a client a couple of years ago, and they were sending every single email they sent out was about like this new promotion and buy this and get this free. And, it was just so salesy, and it made me cringe because I'm like, who's going to want to open these emails all the time? Like, it gets old and it's not helpful and relevant. So hopefully that's a
No,
helpful answer.
I'm definitely glad I asked that question, because and I deliberately asked that because I feel like I've heard so many people talk about this, and a lot of people might think, okay, I'm doing all this work. Why am I not getting money on doing the work? So I'm going to plug this, plug that in there. And like you said, you had a client like that. So I imagine there's a lot of people like that who's saying, I'm going to just put my stuff on there and hope that it hits for whoever open it, they buy something or whatever. So it's so important that you said that. So I'm definitely happy that I asked that question. So we talk a lot about email marketing, but I wanted to get some social media stuff in there. So I think I have about 2 questions before we wrap up, because this has been such good information. How to be strategic with your social media, because I've been going through now as a new entrepreneur and looking at other people. It seems like everyone jumps onto the new wave of what is new and what is coming out. So it's frustrating and it's pressure as a new entrepreneur, because you're like, should I get on that as well? Should I do that? So tell me, what is a strategy that you would advise to new entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs on the platforms that they choose to promote their brand or their business on?
First and foremost, I always tell people to think about their target audience. Just because you like being on Instagram, I'm not saying you specifically, but let's just say you love being on Instagram. It's like your favorite platform. You're very visually focused. You love like following all these great people and photographer, you love Instagram. Okay, who's your target audience though? And are they on Instagram? And again, this is where it can really go back to doing that online research. Like, you can look up your target demographic and get a sense of what platforms they're on. Again, I'm big into data, so I really like having the research to back it up and not just going with like a gut feel. Well, I think my audience is on Instagram. You want to put yourself in your audience's shoes and find out where they are. That is the first step. The next tip that I have is really around not overextending yourself. So often I see people trying to be on 5 different platforms. They're like, well, I just post the same thing on all 5 platforms. Like, that's not ideal. And it's really not a recipe for success. And chances are you're overwhelmed with trying to keep up on 5 different platforms, even if you are automating some of it. So I tell people, pick the 1 or 2 that your audience is on and that you enjoy being on. Because if you pick a platform that you're like, well, I know my audience is here, but I just hate it. Well, every time you go to create content, it's going to be annoying to you and you're not going to want to do it. So you have to find a good balance there. The third point that I want to make to your question about like, okay, the next new thing comes out, the next Clubhouse, the next whatever.
Yeah.
And people may disagree with me here. This is my take on it. Take a step back and wait to see what other people say about it. And this is what I did with Clubhouse. Like, I'm like, oh, should I be there? And there was this like nagging part of me, like, well, should I be there? It seems like everybody's there. And I waited And I waited and I waited and I just kept doing what I was doing. And then this amazing email marketer showed up in my inbox and was like, here are the pros and cons to Clubhouse. Here's what you should know before signing up. And I was like, thank you. I've been waiting for this. Like, it was very smart of her. Um, I say wait. I am not a big proponent of like jumping on the latest and greatest thing before it's kind of vetted by a bunch of people. And then I can better determine whether it makes sense for me to invest my time and energy into learning yet another platform and, spending time and energy there.
Yeah. It's so awesome that you said that because with the same Clubhouse, I waited as well. I heard everybody talking about it, and some people in my network, they were like, Molly, you need to get on this, you need to get on this. And I'm like, uh, I'm already doing so much. I don't know if I have time to put into another platform. So I definitely waited. So that is, I think that is very sound advice, because so many times we want to jump into the pool because we see everyone jump into it, and then at times that burns us because we don't know how to maneuver our way, or we don't know what it's made up of because we didn't take the time to do our research and all of that stuff. So I think
Yeah.
that's definitely sound advice on that.
The other thing with it too is like if the platform is really going to be here to stay, right? Like we've seen things come in waves and it's like, oh, it's the big thing. And then
Yeah.
like by a year later, it's like totally fizzled and nobody's on it. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Clubhouse, but like if it's got legs and it's going to survive and it's going to become one of the biggest platforms, it's still going to be around. It's not like you missed the boat and you're never going to be able to jump on. So I wanted to make that point. And also, like with the Clubhouse example, so I waited and waited and waited. Then when I saw this awesome blog post, I was like, okay, I'm gonna dip my toe in. I downloaded the app. I started like listening into some conversations. I was like, well, this is kind of cool, but I don't know if it's for me, at least not right now in my business, because it felt like something where like I'd get a pop-up notification like, oh, this new room started, you should join it. My schedule is not conducive to that. Like I juggle my own childcare and, running my business. Like it is not often that I'm just like free at the drop of a hat to like join this room and listen in.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that that's something important for people to remember too, is like you can dip your toe in and try it out when the timing is right and not feel like, well, I have to be all in on it. Like, do a trial period, figure out if it's for you, and be okay with walking away from it if it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Because what I've noticed is that if you're not careful, you can be sucked into one platform and forget about everything else, and then it's not even doing anything for you, and you're totally focused on that, and you forget about a lot of other things that you can be doing. So I definitely agree with that. Kristi, this has been such great tips. But before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity if you want to give any last tidbit that maybe I didn't ask that question, or you want to give any last information to the audience.
I don't think so. We covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, I think we gave a lot of good information. So hopefully this is helpful to people. I always, let people know that they can, find me on my website at kristimitchell.com. That's KristiMitchell.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. That is my favorite social media platform.
Yes.
I love creating content for LinkedIn. So follow me there. And if you are interested in connecting, I'm happy to do a networking call. I also offer free consultations. So just reach out.
Yes, definitely. And I will be reaching out. And also, thank you so much for offering that information, because I was going to ask you that next. And I will be putting all of her information, people, in the podcast notes. So you will get to see that. This would be on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well, which is one of my favorite platforms as well. That's where my audience is. I know that. So thank you so much, Kristi, for coming through to the Network Hour podcast and for sharing of your knowledge and expertise with us. This was definitely really eye-opening, and it was really a great episode. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you guys. This has been another episode of the Network Hour podcast. And stay tuned for our upcoming podcast episode next week. And thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for being my loyal listeners. And I will see you and talk to you next time. Bye, everyone.